Good evening. This is the Wednesday, July 25th meeting of the Moscow Planning and Zoning Commission. There are 3 of us present, but 2 others calling in by phone, Rob Parrish and Dennis Wilson. And so we'll start with item number 1, which is approval of the minutes from July 11th. Do I hear any additions, corrections, deletions?
There's 2 corrections.
Okay, there are 2 corrections.
Sure, I'm on the minutes. Yes, okay, so under number 8, first sentence, the joint meeting between the council and probably should have a the Moscow Urban Renewal Agency, and you need a comma after agency because it's a clause. So they're just
Right, so there are typos.
grammaticals, grammaticals.
And any others, or is that's, oh, those are the 2 you meant?
Those
Yeah.
are the 2.
Yeah, okay. Anything else?
I move we accept the minutes.
Okay, is there a second?
Second,
Okay, all in favor?
aye.
Aye.
What about?
Aye.
And Dennis?
Aye.
Okay.
Yes.
Minutes approved. Correspondence, is there any correspondence from staff?
Nothing from staff this evening.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Well, I don't know if we'll have the Transportation Commission meeting report unless somebody was able to substitute for Joel. But he's not here this evening, so I guess we'll go on to the next item, which is public comment. It's an opportunity for members of the public to speak to the commission about issues that aren't on the agenda or currently pending before us. Is there anyone interested in coming up and speaking? Okay, being none, we'll move on to item 5, which is a legislative public hearing for amendment to Title 4, Chapter 6, 7, 8, and 10 of the Moscow City Code requiring various zoning code amendments. And Mike's going to present on that.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. So before you tonight, we have a number of zoning code amendments that we've been working on for the last few months. The first has to do with access to lots and buildings for primarily those rural residential lots in town. So right now we have a requirement that every lot abut a public street right-of-way for a minimum distance of 40 feet. And then we have some exceptions to that. Lots on cul-de-sacs just required to be a minimum of 20 feet. Approved flag lots have to be a minimum of 20, can't exceed 150, and in no point shall be less than 20 feet in width at any point. And then we have twin homes and townhouses, which are all exceptions from that requirement. We allow reduction in width for those types of lots. And then we have portion of this that we amended a number of years ago that accounted for some of those lots that pre-existed. Some of our current zoning codes that weren't abutting a public street right away were more abutting like private access easements, some other alley right away. There were a number of those in town that we ended up including this provision to address those. And then the proposal is to insert lots within the ag forest, farm ranch, suburban residential, where access is provided by a permanent access easement of no less than 20 feet in width at any point, as well as flag poles and access easements within those 3 zoning districts that may be greater than 150 feet in length, so long as sufficient fire department access is provided. So these are primarily those lots in rural areas of town, so North Polk Extension, that may have long, linear, larger lots that may be subdivided, but they're running into that 150-foot length provision, which is more of an urban standard that we have, and usually to address fire department access, and that's why we've got the provision of fire department access in there to make sure that on some of these larger lots, if they do exceed 150 feet in length for the access drive, that they're still able to accommodate some type of fire truck turnaround on the property. So that is the portion of the ordinance that would be amending that section for those rural properties. And then we have the PUD section of the zoning code, and so right now we currently don't have any where in the PUD section where we address whether or not PUDs are allowed in zoning districts. And so wanted to include this addition at the beginning of eligibility and state the number of zoning districts and which ones where PUDs are permitted. So we'd be adding ag forest, farm ranch, suburban residential, R1, R2, R3, R4, residential office, neighborhood business, motor business, and general business zones. And most of these were already included within the base density, so it's just inherent that they probably were allowed within those zones, but we wanted to be clear by inserting this paragraph at the very beginning. And then after the commission discussion about the neighborhood business zone, wanted to include a statement there about providing commercial services which serve adjacent residential neighborhood, and that any PUD proposed within the neighborhood business zone shall incorporate at least one commercial use located along primary street frontage. And so that was the commission's concern, which was stated before, that since the neighborhood business zones intended to be this commercial zoning district that borders residential neighborhoods, that it's should be treated as a special zone that should have some type of commercial use located in it if you go through a PUD development within that zone. So we added that paragraph at the beginning, just clearly stating eligibility. And then the base densities were listed previously when we didn't have residential office or neighborhood business. So we would just be inserting those and just taking, the most apparent dwelling units per acre, which was 24 dwelling units per acre, which is also included in the R4 motor business and general business zones. And so those are the changes for the PUD section. And then Chapter 8 covers appeals, variances, conditional and special uses. There's a number of sections there that go through the procedures of those land use actions, the criteria and standards that are required to approve those, requiring a reasoned statement in writing with the criteria, going through conditions of approval, no precedence or transfer. So, you get approved for one property, you can't just transfer it to another without another conditional use. The final decision, compliance, and revocations. And so, first of all, we need to eliminate special uses. Since we approved the land use table, we eliminated special uses from that, and so we just have conditional uses. And so part of this is just eliminating that section on special uses. And then the revocation section, currently we have a requirement that if a building permit's not obtained within a year of the board's final decision, that the CUP is revoked and shall be null and void. And then we also have a statement at the end: if use and or occupancy for which a conditional use permit is approved ceases for a period of 12 consecutive months, then the permit is revoked and automatically null is void as well. And so we're running into, just over the years, issues with the 1 year time period for some of those larger users, mainly institutional uses that were usually developed maybe in phases. That weren't, maybe they get approval and then they start the fundraising process, and they were running into issues with this 1 year date. And so we did a cross comparison from a number of other jurisdictions within the state, and we looked at that research previously, and looked like a lot, those other jurisdictions, they were at least 2 years for the approval period. And so we had gone in and struck the revocations portion and actually moved that to the end of the conditional use permit. But we wanted to amend the variance section, and so we would be amending that. And so instead of the year, it would be not exceeding 2 years from the date of the final decision unless otherwise approved by the board. If the approval shall expire if the holder of the permit has not completed one or more of the following. And so just not really tied to building permits like we did before, but construction permits and commence placement of permanent footings and infrastructure, or commence the use. And so there could be a use that didn't require any building permit to be established, but maybe the use was established. And so those two sub-bullets there would vest you for the variance. And then we wanted to provide an extension through zoning administrator approval. And so it would be granting one time extension for a 2-year period to an unexpired variance. And so the variance, the applicant would have to request this from the zoning administrator. And so extensions of variances shall also extend any associated zoning approvals such as variances prior to the expiration of the 2-year approval period granted by the zoning administrator. They may request additional time extension from the board, which shall be considered as a regular agenda item. And so the zoning administrator may grant, and then they can go before the Board of Adjustment and have them review it. And then there's a little bit of direction in determining whether to grant the extension and the amount of time for which the extension shall be valid. The board shall take the following factors. And so looking at whether there's been significant amendments to the comp plan or the zoning ordinance, which will affect the conditional use permit, whether or not there's been significant land use changes in the vicinity, which would adversely impact the project or adversely impact, or be adversely impacted by the project, excuse me, and whether community facilities and services remain adequate to serve the project. Should the Board of Adjustment decide not to grant the extension request, the variance shall be null and void, and the applicant will be required to start from the beginning of the variance process. So, looking at a number of those factors and whether or not they've changed, if they haven't changed, then, the board would go ahead and grant the extension at their discretion as far as the variance. And then the conditional use permit section would be essentially the same language as the variance section. We would go in at the end and add a revocation portion of that, and so this is just carrying over what we had before, only increasing it from 1 year to 2 years if the CUP ceases to exist for that time period. It'd be automatically null and void. And so that would be that amendment. And then we have, looking at public hearing notice requirements, so we have the same process essentially for these certain types of land use actions. We have annexation, comp plan, land use designation amendment, rezone, preliminary plat, PUD. And the process is begins with the neighborhood meeting, which the applicant's required to conduct. We get everybody within 600 feet is notified through a series of mailing labels. They send it out 14 days in advance of the neighborhood meeting. And then once they have those materials, they would submit the application along with those materials to our department. We would notice public hearing before Planning and Zoning Commission. We would also notice all property owners within 600 feet. And this is doubling, right now doubling what the state requirement is. State statute says that you have to notify everybody within 300 feet, and so we've doubled that as long as I've been here. And there is a 30-day notice requirement right now before Planning and Zoning Commission, and that's posted 7 days in advance of the meeting on the subject property. And then P&Z gives a recommendation to City Council, and there's another public hearing before City Council, and they notify all property owners within 600 feet again, and there's just 15 days notice for the City Council hearing. And so also posted 7 days in advance of the meeting. And so what we proposed here is just for Planning and Zoning Commission, eliminate the 30-day notice requirement and reduce that to 15 days prior to the required public hearing for the Planning and Zoning Commission. And so the thought behind that is 30 days oftentimes, would kind of defeat the purpose and act in the reverse of what you're looking for is to notify the public. So it's so far out, usually people lose track of that. And once you add in the process before that for the neighborhood meeting, just really extends out the application for, an additional 15 days, which, we viewed as kind of unneeded in a lot of these circumstances. So those are the proposed amendments. Staff's recommendation is to conduct the public hearing, and after considering testimony, recommend approval of the ordinance to City Council. I'd certainly be able to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions from people? Yes, Victoria.
You got the typo? You got the typo I sent you?
I did, yeah, and I can pass out. I've got a revised ordinance there I can pass out. So.
It's just one word.
Kurt? Yeah.
So are all of the neighborhood meetings posted on the city website by any chance?
They aren't, because it's up to the applicant to conduct those. So they would notify everybody within 600 feet, and those would be the only people that are notified.
Yeah.
And then they conduct it on their own, so there's no city involvement with the neighborhood meeting. And so they choose the location at their discretion, put together. We have requirements in our code that you have to have certain things like a map, a contact, meeting time, date, and location.
Yeah, and are they notified by a mailer?
Yeah, they request labels through our department, and so we run the same process. We notify everybody, so we'll do that in our GIS system, export that to an Excel table of everybody within 600 feet, and then we print labels for them, and they just come to our office and pay a minimal fee and take those labels, and then they use those labels to notify everybody with their whatever they choose to mail out. So.
Yeah. And when does the 14-day clock start ticking? Like from the time the mailer gets put in the mail, or like what's the official start of that 14 days?
It's usually when it's mailed. So they'll need to mail it out 14 days in advance of the hearing.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I was just wondering if it's, if it's cutting the time a little short in terms of a mailer notification. If it goes out, if it has to be in the mail 2 weeks before the meeting, that's probably sufficient.
And it's also posted on the property, right? Or isn't there?
The neighborhood meeting isn't. At
okay.
the next stage is for the public hearing before planning and zoning.
Okay.
Yeah, it gets sent out.
Rob or Dennis, do you have any questions? Are you raising? your
No.
hand?
Oh, sorry, Dennis. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Rob.
Oh, I was just going to say we had spent quite a bit of time working through most of these issues, and I think Kurt's question is certainly appropriate, but I'm good with the changes that have been proposed.
Dennis, did you have a question?
That's exactly where I stand. I mean, we did. We spent significant time. We got it all laid out, and it's just now put in the package. And so, yeah, I'm ready to move forward with it as well.
Okay. I don't really have any questions, so thank you. I guess we'll open the public hearing and see if anybody wants to come up and talk in support of, contrary to, or somewhere in the middle. Have a question? Yes. Do you want to?
David Hall, 1334 Wallen Road, Moscow. I have a couple of substantive things and then a lot of editorial. I don't know if you want me to go through all the editorials. I did bring one copy of the.
Do you want? Are they mostly typos or something else? Or oh no. Oh.
Rewording or clarification?
Okay.
The substantive comments, I'd like to see it remain 1 year for both the variance and the conditional use permit. And I'd like to keep the 30-day notice. People could be out of town, and some of these decisions can be pretty major, and it can take a while to think through and get everything lined up for comments. So.
And I'm sorry, I was looking at your notes when your first point. I got the 30-day notice one, but what was your first point?
I'd like to keep the 1 year time period for the variance and the CUP rather than extending it.
And
to 2 years.
What would be your reasoning on that, do you think?
2 years is a long time, it seems to me, to work through things. If project's moving ahead, it should move ahead, I think.
And
I guess the other most substantive thing is on deciding upon an extension. it said both for the variance and this conditional use permit, that the board shall take into following factors 1, 2, or 3 with an or in between. I think it should be an and. I think all those factors should be looked at. Not to say, well, I want to look at one and yes or no, but if there are problems with any of the 3, then they should be considered. Whether there's significant amendments to comp plan, whether there have been significant land use changes, and whether community facilities and services remain adequate. I think all those should need to be considered.
Well, I think that, well, Mike, do you want to respond to that comment? Because my understanding is that you want to really look at all 3 of them, and if any of them apply, then it would be denied, correct?
Yeah, I think we want to say that if either of those, any 3 of those is met, then they would probably kick it back to a public hearing and go through the process. We won't want to say that all of them had to be met in order
Right,
for
but
that
they
to
should all be looked at.
Right.
Yeah, they're all
I don't
looked
think
at.
that's,
They would
I
all
don't
be
think that's
looked
the
at.
way it
Wait.
reads if you read it
You're
carefully.
going to have to point to where we read it.
Also, in that paragraph, it's a little confusing which extension request you're talking about, whether the board decides or who, because there's 2 extensions in there, and the wording, you can kind of guess which text goes with which extension request. And it also did not say what criteria the first extension request must meet, how that's decided whether it's granted or not. I think that should be in there somehow. And I think everything else, like you had flagpole in one paragraph and flag lot in another, you might try to make that consistent. The other things are just, and where only should be, they should
I'm
be
going
closer
to
to
give
what
this
they're
to
adjusting.
Mike to respond to because it makes more sense than me.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
Yes, I
So-
agree.
Try to answer any questions. There's one string of words that's not a sentence that I marked there, page 2 of 15.
It's probably the one I have too. It's probably that one.
That's
Oh, yeah. I see.
number 5.
Yeah,
near the top.
we got that one.
Okay.
That one we picked up on
Number 6 is
Two of us
flag
did.
poles, but on number 2 above you have flag lots.
page 6.
And they're 2
One on
different.
page 2, and one on page 1.
And they're 2 different things. So
Oh,
a flag lot includes the flagpole portion. So we're just clarifying that the flagpole is actually the access drive portion.
Okay.
And so that's why that would be different, but.
Okay.
Then I'm only seeing 1 extension. I don't see that there's 2.
Yeah, we had talked about that. So, the extension of the approval term. So the zoning administrator may grant 1 2-year extension to an unexpired variance upon written request of the applicant. Extensions of variances shall also be extended to any associated approvals. Prior to expiration of the 2-year approval term granted by the zoning administrator, so that was the first year, the applicant may request an additional time extension from the Board of Adjustment, which shall be considered as a regular agenda item. So you get the 1 2-year extension from the zoning administrator.
And then a second one.
Then you get the second one, which is reviewed by the Board of Adjustment as a regular agenda item. And then in determining whether to grant the extension request and the amount of time for which the extension shall be valid, the board shall take the following factors, and those are the 3 factors in a consideration.
Right, so they look at all 3, and if any of them apply, presumably they would deny the extension,
Correct.
or even deny
Yeah.
the variance, yeah.
And also within that paragraph talks about the extension, and it's a little unclear which extension, the one that goes back to the board or the one that Maybe it's automatically granted, I don't know how the intermediate one
Both.
is decided.
The first one is just a request to the zoning administrator, so
So you
there's
can say
no.
yes or no, or it's automatically, or,
Yeah, if they request it, then presumably it should be granted.
okay.
And then the second extension is by the Board of Adjustment, and they have to look at those factors. And those are really the factors that you're concerned about when a variance or a conditional use permit's approved, whether or not the area has changed. I mean, if the area hasn't changed for 10 years, then there should be no other information that's submitted to the Board of Adjustment that would make a different decision when they're looking at it. So that's the whole presumption, is that,
Yeah.
those are the issues that you need to look at. And since since they got approval, and then they got the 2-year extension, so that's 4 years from the date of approval, the Board of Adjustment has to look at it at that point, and I think 4 years is a reasonable time frame where one of those things may have changed.
Yeah.
Right.
But
Whereas a year, you're saying, when it's just a zoning administrator, would be not of significant amount of,
yeah, the fact of
time.
the matter is, we just don't grow fast enough for uses to change. I mean, if we were down in Boise area, and maybe we had 5 new subdivisions developed around the area within 2 years, and it expired, then maybe at that point, you would want to go back and reassess the, dynamics of the conditional use permit. And so that's really, kind of what we're talking about here.
Okay.
I'm wondering if, hearing the concern about 30 days or 15 days, how would you feel about 21 days? Then if somebody's out of town for 2 weeks, they still have time to, I don't know, just.
Well, I mean, most of the time, so we're required to put it in the paper by this time frame. So it has to get mailed to the Daily News 30 days in advance. And so when we mail that to the Daily News, it has to be the Wednesday before the Saturday where it's published. And so the mailings go out earlier that week anyway, because this is already prepared and, ready for so it's even, more than the 30 days that's required right now for all of them.
So,
Any other?
well, we appreciate your looking at something that's not the most fun read and
That's true. I put it
offering
off
your
to the last
opinions on it.
minute,
Yeah. Thank you. Did you want to come and speak, or no? Okay. With that, I think we'll close the public hearing and deliberate among ourselves. Dennis or Rob, do you have anything you want to add or question?
Yeah, I'm good. Particularly the time frames. I think Mike had talked a lot about the logistics of that, and I'm comfortable with where we were with that final draft.
Okay. And how about you, Dennis?
Yeah, I'm the same.
Okay.
I'm good. Yeah, we went over it and talked about it and discussed it, and I think I'm good with it.
Okay. And Victoria, you have a...
Yeah, a couple of things. David sits in on my other commission as a guest. He's an excellent proofreader, so thank you, David, for doing that.
Yeah, thank you.
That's above the call of duty. Thank you. The other thing is, at the farmer's market, someone mentioned this to me, the length of time that they felt they wanted to see it stay 30 days. So I want to mention that was also brought up to me by another person. And it was, he didn't actually mention that people might be on vacation, but that it's just logistically more difficult. And so I thought about that, and I came to the same thing, maybe 21 days, because 2 weeks could be tight when you're talking about a group of people in a neighborhood, although you have the other hearing, so you have some other time built in there. And I still feel like 30 days was too long for the process, but I was also thinking 21 days. So since you thought of it too, I definitely want to mention it.
Okay. And any other comments? Well, are we ready to vote on this or discuss the, do I hear a motion or what?
No, I like some thought.
Okay. Some response on the
Yeah, I
21
want,
day.
yeah, on the 21 days, I want some response. It's not just me saying it, or just, I want some response on that.
Right, okay.
We hadn't thought of that before, and we have at least 2 citizens who have brought up the issue.
Well, I mean, between this schedule here, you're looking at over 2 months of notice requirements right now, from the neighborhood meeting to the hearing before planning and zoning to the hearing before city council. And so either you're on sabbatical or, I mean, the vacation, 1-2 weeks, at the most for the typical person. But, if we're catering to the one person that may be gone for 2-3 months, during the summer, then.
I'm not advocating either way at this point, but to go from 14 days to 21 days is a week, not adding months, so.
Personally, I can see the issue you're talking about, but we're keeping the public hearing before P&Z still a 30-day noticed process. And to me, that's quite a bit of time to really come and express your views to people who are going to be making a recommendation to city council, because that's the formal sort of process, legislative process. So because of that, because that's still 30 days, I'm comfortable with it.
That's what we're proposing to change to
That's what we're
15.
changing.
Oh, 15. Oh, on the second. Wait a minute. So I
This is
messed
the
up.
way,
public
this is the
hearing.
way it is now, and then.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I was looking at the wrong thing. Whoops. Yeah, and it all made sense when we were going through it, and it said, yeah, well, okay, that sounds like a good timeline, but I can see some of the issues that people are having, so let's see. How about you, Kurt? What are you thinking?
Yeah, sorry to get us on the merry-go-round again.
Yeah, no, I mean,
So it seems to me like the biggest issue is, does it add, so this can go before the city council every 2 weeks? Is that how often the city council meets? And then P and Z is every 2 weeks.
And they're offset.
Yeah, and so that was the thing that occurs to me is however that time frame works, we want to try not to add another 2-week wait
right.
onto things. So
Yeah,
does
it
that,
could be the same. I mean, if it went down to 21 days, then you still might be waiting 30 days anyway, just because of the way the meetings fall.
yeah.
Okay, I hadn't thought of that. Good point.
And so if those, let's see, if those were all 15 days, it's still 45 days for the whole process.
And there's 2 opportunities to go make your voice heard. If you can't make one, you can make the other.
Well, there's 3, right?
Right, I mean, if you missed, yeah.
Decisions,
right.
there's 2 for decisions.
Yeah, 2, one a recommendation and one a decision, yeah.
And a person doesn't have to attend. You can email, mail your responses in.
Right.
And I assume the other side of the coin is if somebody's out there waiting to do something, and we don't want to hold them up forever. But I want to be fair, Can we, David would like to say something?
You can, well, we've closed the public hearing, I'm sorry. Yeah, so.
Is it something we can ask a question? Give me a hint.
Say a lot of people wouldn't know about the first 14 days. Will be affected.
Well, if anybody within the 600 feet gets a mailed notice.
Yeah, so they're getting
Whole city.
3 notices over a 45-day period, or more, I guess, even possibly longer, depending on how the meetings schedule.
Well, I think Mike's point that,
City council is
that
staggered.
21 days could be a de facto 30 days anyway, so that has to be considered.
Yeah, and oftentimes we have to come back and approve relevant criteria and standards for all of these. So
They're 2
it ends
weeks.
up, it's not necessarily notice, it's just time between that you have to wait in order to be able to move ahead, because you have to approve relevant criteria and standards before it.
So I mean, and both public hearings are noticed in a lot of other ways. They're on the city website, yes?
We're on the city
Yeah.
website, and we're required to send it and be published in the Daily News. Is
Yeah.
our official newspaper.
Yeah. So I think it would be.
And on-site.
Yeah, I think it would be fluky if somebody, misses out on a chance to be heard on the difference between 14 days and 21 days in one thing.
Well, I guess I feel that there are redundant opportunities to come and make your opinions known in an official setting, and because of that, I'm comfortable with it as proposed, but, I mean, if you can't make P and Z meeting, you go to city council. It's, it means that we've made a recommendation, but they've, made decisions that are opposite of what we've decided before, so it's not.
Yeah, I'll come down on the side of the call-in guys.
Okay, so does somebody want to make a motion? Or Victoria, did you have any more you wanted to?
No,
Yeah.
but I don't know if they want to weigh in or not.
Okay, well, I have asked them several times. Hello, would you, Rob or Dennis, would you like to add anything?
No, I'm good.
Okay, thank you. All right,
Too, I'm good.
okay, so we're going to put it to a vote. I mean, we're going to, I'm entertaining a motion.
Motion, so I make a motion that we accept these amendments as written and forward them to the city council. Is that the right motion?
Well,
Pending approval?
Recommending approval?
I'm not going to second it unless we accept corrections, because there are corrections.
Oh, with.
Because I know I pointed out a
typographical-
correction. It was a
Right,
typo.
and
Oh.
typographical.
So it needs corrections in there.
Right, and.
And they need to look at what David gave them, because we haven't
Well, then
seen.
we can table the vote, I don't know.
No, I've got, for Victoria's correction, I've got new copies, so we don't necessarily, you can make sure that your change is there, and then we can just approve it.
Okay, well, my correction was a simple word, so.
Yeah, and I have the same correction that I also sent to him, so ahead of time, so he's aware of it.
Yep.
And did it impact content? So
It did,
Yeah,
yeah.
so we got that, we both got that one.
Okay, and then, I mean, can we recommend it with you looking at David's typographic?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's just, it's public comment, so we'll go back and review it, and then, if anything needs to be changed, we can do that before city council.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
That's
So, so you want to amend the motion to say,
Yeah, with
With
any
correct-
necessary corrections
good. And clarifications.
and clarifications.
I think you clarified the difference between flag
Yes.
pole and
Yes.
flag lot.
Yeah.
And that was really important, and that was a good one, so. Yeah.
And I will second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
All right, okay. Thank you. So, and thank you, David, for coming and pointing, making those points to us. All right. Oh, and we have no relevant criteria with legislative amendments, so we don't need anything on that. All right. So our next item, 6, is approval of reasoned statements of relevant criteria and standards for property at Lot 1, Block 1 of the Peterson Second Edition to the City of Moscow. And Mike, do you want to comment on that? or-
Yeah, this is just our standard relevant criteria and standards document, and I've just prepared it to reflect what the decision was that night.
Yeah, for some reason I have 2 copies of the same thing, and missing the other one. Where is it? Oh, it's right here.
This is the Baker Street one.
If you look at the footer, it's easier.
Oh, yeah. This is Baker Street.
I love
Oh, here
those
we are.
insider tips.
How about that?
They all look the same when you're looking at just the all caps. There we go. Yeah, that's a nice little tip. Okay.
Well, it all looked good to me.
I agree. I think it was well put together, so.
So we make a motion to just approve?
Let me just, are there any comments from you, Dennis or Rob?
No, in fact, I don't know. Is it appropriate for either of us to make a motion or a second?
Well, I did from Port Townsend 2 weeks ago, so you're part of the meeting. You're welcome to.
Well, I don't want to steal Kurt's thunder here.
I have no thunder.
Okay. Are you, so you're so moving?
I would move that we approve the reason statement of relevant criteria and standards regarding a proposed rezone of a 32,569 square foot parcel of land located at 406 Baker Street in the city of Moscow.
Okay, do I hear a second?
Second.
I would second.
Okay, so Victoria seconded before you did, Dennis, so you'll have to do the next one. All in
Okay.
favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Okay, thank you. So, moving on to item 7. Approval of reason statements of relevant criteria and standards for the proposed Legacy Crossing District Plan amendment. And I know, where is it
Where's
now?
that one?
Yeah,
It's right here. Okay.
yeah, it's right in front of me and I don't see it. Okay. Here we are. All right. They all, yeah, these documents all look the same tonight. It's like aging eyes. Okay. So there was that one important, let's see, I had a, did you want to present, Mike, or no? You just want, okay.
Yes, and these are the clean ones with your corrections.
Okay, so yeah, because I had one comment that just in section 19, item 19, section 3.10.2, it should be off-street parking in line 3. It just says off parking, and he's picked that up. But I did have,
And another one.
Anybody remember when computers were going to lead to a paperless office?
oh, I had a question that it's about item 16, number bullet 3.5. I guess it's on the sequential page where we're talking, develop a plan for acquisition and development of public parking areas downtown and collect a fee in lieu of parking spaces on significant redevelopment projects that occur on parcels that are not large enough to support required amounts of off-street parking. How does this work exactly? Because what it's bringing to mind is our fee in lieu of land space that's totally inadequate. And I'm just wondering is the fee really large enough to support the cost of parking construction? That was something that I wondered about.
Wow.
That's just a recommendation from the comprehensive plan, looking at creating more public parking in the downtown area. I don't think we've moved forward on that, mainly because I don't know there'd be a fee in lieu of that would be high enough to pay for a public parking structure, and so that's
Right.
why that one is set dormant for this time period.
Okay, that's what I suspected, but I wondered how it was working, and it seems like one that's difficult to quantify. So just wondering, but it's just aspirational, is what you're saying. Okay.
Did a really nice job of laying all these out, Michael.
Yeah. I mean, even though we are getting them confused tonight, but yes, there's okay. Well, are there any comments on the reason statement of relevant criteria and standards for the Legacy Crossing district amendment? Anybody?
I have nothing.
That's
No,
Dennis?
I'm good.
Okay. Kurt?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm
Victoria?
Good.
Okay, so do I hear a motion?
Sure. I'll make a motion, we accept the reason statement of relevant findings and conclusions, et cetera, for restated Legacy Crossing Urban Renewal Plan.
Is there a second?
Second.
Oh, Victoria already jumped the gun. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, well, I think we've come to the end of the evening very quickly here. Let's see. The only thing I can think of is, that's maybe other business, is just a recap a little bit of the planning conference for those of us who were able to go on Friday. It was, I think, very, very interesting, and Nels and Victoria and I went, and there was a presentation on viticulture, and one on that might be more directly coming into our future on short-term rentals and B&B, Airbnbs, et cetera, how Coeur d'Alene's dealing with it and other jurisdictions. And then a whole session on ethics, so we got a review. And it was actually also inclusive of commissioners and, you know, what our responsibilities are, so that was interesting. Did you have anything you wanted to? And after that, I went home, and because I think the next thing was a tour by Nels of the Historic District, and I've done that 100 times, so leading towards myself, so I didn't go. But anyway.
I did do the tour. Yeah, it was very interesting. I found the planning for Lewiston where they're overlooking the levee, they're overlooking the river.
Right.
As part of an asset for the city of Lewiston and trying to bring that in as part of
I completely forgot about that.
featuring
Yeah,
the,
that was
the
good,
river and developing
Yeah.
that area in a way that
Yeah.
would be complementary and
Right.
conducive to it. I love that kind of vision thing, but it's a really good idea.
Yeah, Joel Plankton, the city planner, who did he used to be here? Okay, yeah, couldn't remember if he was at the university or here. Yeah, and he actually created a new zone that had a kind of morphed name of Form and Impact Zone, I think it was called, right?
Yeah.
And,
FIBS.
Form and Impact Zone. I asked him, you know, where did this come from? Oh, I made it up. And actually, but he customized it to that district to try to achieve the goals that they hoped they can achieve. And it'll be exciting to see if it actually goes forward. And it's somewhat comparative to our Legacy Crossing
That's what I thought.
vision, I think, in terms of trying to inject new energy into a former industrial zone that's underutilizing its potential. Different goals, but same, different context, So anyway, so it was enjoyable, and thank you for including us in it. And yeah, it was. All right.
You need to announce no meeting next time.
Oh, there is no meeting on August 8th. It's canceled. And Rob and I hope to have a little bit of a visioning session about shared reading goals and discussion at the second meeting in August. Reserve a little time on the agenda. Be thinking about goals for that.
Can I stray off topic for a second?
It's only 5 to 8, so you're welcome to.
So I've been thinking about the neighborhood business zone, and it's come up a couple of times in conversations with people. How often is it actually used for what could be called a neighborhood business? I mean something that is expressly for kind of the local area. How often is the business located that's designed to serve the neighborhood? And what I'm wondering about is, well, is this kind of a redundancy that's not being used much, and is it worth keeping if it is?
Well, I think it serves an important purpose in identifying these commercial nodes that are outside of, on the periphery of kind of our city core and the rest of the commercial services that are primarily on the highway corridors. So I think it's important that we have this zone as we grow, especially to the east and the northeast, that we designate these areas for commercial use, or else we're going to end up with, more residential development without those services, so you're going to end up having to drive further and not be able to walk or bike to these amenities. Probably the most recent, except for, I guess, the neighborhood business that was approved by City Council for the rezone last time, was Harvest Hills at the northeast corner of Mountain View and 3rd Street. And so, if you think about that, I think the next nearest neighborhood business is down the street. I believe that Picard Orthodontics, that corner, is neighborhood business, and the northwest corner of 6th and Mountain View. And so, that serves a purpose as a, as a dental office that's in close proximity to the neighborhood, and probably serves the community as a whole still, but would serve that adjacent neighborhood east of Mountain View and west of Blaine Street and, the surrounding area there.
So maybe it's just a thing of, a semantic difference on neighborhood, rather than just some kind of other business district. I mean, and I guess it's just as good to call it neighborhood, but.
It's intended to be more or less a spot zone.
Yeah.
And that's the distinction between other areas. And so usually you don't have a piece of motor business in an area. You have a long corridor. You don't have a piece of central business. You've got the whole district. Same with general business. And so it's more meant to be this node of commercial activity that's surrounding a neighborhood, and that's why we have the intent crafted that way, is to be able to make it apply to a residential area and be this spot zone. Everybody always thinks of a spot zone as being something that's illegal and not allowed. We used to have one of our criteria that said, not necessarily, that we got rid of, that said not necessarily an illegal spot zoning. But in these circumstances, that's exactly what it is, but that's the intention, is to have this spot of commercial that would serve the neighborhood.
Yeah, okay. So let's just call it a neighborhood business and be done with it.
Well, I think that what we have experienced is a bit of pushback every time, not every time, but sometimes when we try to approve that zone. With the Mountain View property, I remember there was pushback from the neighborhood to the along Mountain View and also from the east, and so we listened to people and actually recommended against it, if you recall, but City Council reversed our decision, and I'm not so sure that was a bad thing. I think it was, it's kind of like you have to balance between what people want and what's in the comprehensive plan, and it was certainly in compliance with the spirit of the comprehensive plan, so it was a tough one. I think we all had a bit of agonizing over it. And those are the kinds of issues we run into. Victoria and I were talking a bit about it, and also other people, that what do you do when people come and they're not happy with the decision we make, but we're totally in alignment with the intent of the comprehensive plan and also people's property rights to develop their property according to that, and you get pushback, and then people think you're not listening to them, but really the change has to happen somewhere else besides up here in the middle of a public hearing. It has to be something that if people aren't happy with it, then they have to come out and express that. But, go ahead.
So I think on the neighborhood business, trying to sort that through, I wasn't sitting here when you made the decision on Mountain View, but I remember it.
Right.
I think when people hear neighborhood business, they feel like business is coming into my neighborhood.
They think slurp and burp.
And instead of this low intensity, mild kind of business that's no longer a mom and pop business, it's somebody else running it, but that kind of business. And so I think there's a reaction, and that we don't and it's wording, it's the image, it's how we've come to think of things. And because the mixed-use concept and having some kind of small business, and I don't see it as that will serve Almond Street and Asbury specifically, because those people really need this business. It just, if it improves the neighborhood and offers some opportunity and dresses it up a little bit, speaking of
Well,
that
some
area,
diversity,
and
so,
some
yeah,
diversity,
yeah.
and so that you're not totally dependent on getting in your car and going somewhere to get whatever it is you need, you know. So there's a perception thing out there that.
Yeah, and I guess what irks me is I just find the term neighborhood business kind of inaccurate. I mean, I agree completely with the purpose and the point of it. But I mean, the reality is the orthodontics office is not serving, within a 4-block radius of that. So I don't know if there's any way to make it a little bit clearer, or if it's even worth messing with. So maybe, Mike, in your spare time, you could work on that.
So is it more like a small-scale business than a neighborhood business, where you want to have
Well, it's sort of a
small-scale
pocket.
Like Pocket Park?
As a pocket
Pocket
business.
business.
Or a low-impact business.
Low-impact business, yeah.
I guess part of the issue is scale.
Yeah.
Moscow's
Because part
small.
of it is scale, right.
So you could have a neighborhood business in Salt Lake City
Yeah.
that would serve that neighborhood.
Right.
But you have a restaurant anywhere in town, regardless of whether it's located in a neighborhood business zone, people
Yeah.
from the entire city are gonna go to that restaurant.
right.
It's not just gonna be, they may be more frequented by the people that live in the surrounding area, but you're gonna get everybody going to that establishment.
Yeah.
Same with the orthodontics, If you were in a larger city, you would have this, maybe a commercial node like neighborhood business and have that, and it would serve that neighborhood. But just because of the size of the community, you end up running into that issue.
Right, it's in the
Good
planning
point.
language, and it has been for quite a while. I mean, in general, just planning professions language, the term. And so, to some degree, like you said, it's more difficult to, the context of its use vary quite considerably, so.
You could just define the neighborhood as anywhere within a 10-minute bike ride, and
Yeah,
that would pretty much cover
the
Moscow.
town.
Yeah.
Well, when if you took a mile radius, it covers 50% of Moscow,
yeah.
just about. So that does become, and I remember, was it a 7-Eleven that was on 6th Street before it became next to the funeral parlor? When I first moved here, that was a quick stop, and, a lot of people coming in from the east side, eastern
Yeah,
suburbs.
and
suburbs
I
would
think
come
that
in.
was, that's maybe another neighborhood business zone there.
Yeah,
It's since transitioned to, I think an eye doctor.
yeah.
They don't have a.
But, that's, a lot of people just connotate neighborhood business with a convenience store. And
Right.
they think about the worst scenario, a 7-Eleven that's 30 years old and has just unsavory activities happening at it. And so that's part of it.
Well, and they're not always just the bar run at the end of the night. You use them all day long,
Well, and it also could be, I think,
I see a
wasn't
lot
an
of workers go in and get a lunch, get something for lunch, and when I go in the one that's in my neighborhood, which I don't do often, but every time I go in there, if it's during the day, somebody's coming in there that looks like they've been out working somewhere, and they're picking up something to eat.
I mean, in a sense, Third Street Market is a bit of that service for people wanting to pick up quick items in the neighborhood up the hill from it. And so,
Well, Mike's explanation clarified it for me, so.
oh, good, okay. Well, be thinking of goals for our sort of continuing education program, and we'll run through some in a couple weeks here, and I guess a month. And Mike, have a good vacation. And yeah, okay, meeting adjourned.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Good night.
Thanks, Rob. Dennis?
Thank you, guys. See you later. Talk
Good
soon.
night. Thanks for calling in.